We decided that given that we are a nation of immigrants, anybody who lives in the continental United States has to say that unless he or she is an American Indian, that their grandparents or forebears immigrated into the United States, or they wouldn't be there. So we have to be generous, I think, in our policy. Secondly, we have to be humane because that's the kind of nation we are. Thirdly, we have to be rational because the present system is so complicated and so amended that it becomes almost irrational.
Please welcome Executive Director of the National Immigrant Justice Center, Mary Meg McCarthy, from the class of 1980.
Generous, humane, and rational. Those are the three principles Father Hesburgh defined so well in this video. Hold those principles in your mind. Hold them in your heart. For decades, those are the principles that guided Father Hesburgh in his work for immigration policy. Decades long of work. At the National Immigrant Justice Center, where I serve as the executive director, for 30 years, we have integrated those principles into our work. In our work representing immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. In our advocacy, we have a unique approach. We see what's happening on the ground, and we use that knowledge to advance systemic reform through litigation, advocacy, and legislative reform. We work with about 1,600 pro bono attorneys, with a staff of 100 individuals, lawyers, and paralegals committed to justice. Our reach is broad, from San Diego to South Bend, with offices in Chicago and Washington, D.C. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how we integrate those three principles. Let's begin with generosity. Generosity is embodied in the 1,600 pro bono attorneys who work tirelessly to represent individuals, from adults to families to children, in immigration court. Many of you may not know, individuals in immigration proceedings do not have a right to legal counsel. Even children, unaccompanied immigrant children, have no one, are alone in a courtroom with a judge and a government prosecutor. These pro bono attorneys give generously of their expertise, of their time, of their skills to ensure a fair day in court. I'm often reminded of Father Ted's generosity and spirit when I see these attorneys. Many of them are Notre Dame grads. In fact, one individual, Leanne Russo, graduated from Notre Dame and has been a pro bono partner working with NIJC for more than 20 years, representing asylum seekers from Mexico to Africa. In fact, in her work, in the work of her firm, Jones Day, they have opened an office in Laredo, Texas, to represent detained individuals who have no access to counsel. They represent women, mothers who've been separated from their children. That firm has been committed to the rule of law. In fact, their managing partner, Steve Brogan, is a Notre Dame graduate and a member of the Board of Trustees. That generosity makes a difference. Leanne has retired as a partner at Jones Day, but continues to represent individuals in seeking asylum. Humanity, humaneness. We have a system right now that we need to figure out how we inject humane treatment. We are depriving individuals of their human rights. Children are being caged, families are being separated, individuals are being denied adequate mental health and medical care when detained, and people are being isolated in remote jails for long periods of time. How do we advance a more humane system? At the National Immigrant Justice Center, we do it on two levels. One, the systemic level, and the other, individual. Systemically, we investigate what is happening, particularly in these jails, whether they're county jails or for-profit prisons. And we expose those human rights violations to educate our elected officials, our policymakers, the public. Father Ted said in the video, we can humanize the system because we're a good country. But what's happened to that sense of humanity, of caring for the other? This is one of our greatest challenges today, opening the hearts and minds of individuals. Two quick stories on how we address this on an individual level. Yvette, a mother of a 3-year-old, fled her home country, traveled miles, thousands of miles, walking, taking buses with a 3-year-old. She was seeking asylum, protection, safety. She arrived at our border. The immigration officers arrested her, and she and her 3-year-old child were placed in a detention facility. The child was sleeping in her arms, and the government official took that 3-year-old child away from her. She was placed in a detention center in Texas, and the child in a shelter in the Midwest. The National Immigrant Justice Center was representing this child, located the mother, and we fought for 8 months to reunite that family. That 3-year-old child, when that mother finally held him in her arms again, was 4 years old. And it was only because of court intervention that that family was reunited. Last week, we had a family who lived in the United States for 15 years. And on Tuesday morning, this family was deported. How did that happen? The daughter was driving her 5-year-old daughter to school. She had DACA. An unmarked car stopped her, and she said to the officer, "What happened?" And the officer said, "We're taking you in. We're part of immigration authorities." She said, "I have DACA." They said, "Too bad. Get in the car." So her 5-year-old child was alone in the car. And she said, "Well, at least I want to take my children to my parents' home to care for her." They got to the family home, the parents' home. The father was walking out. He's a mechanic with his tools in his hand. The mother, the grandmother of the 5-year-old, was in the house in her pajamas. They arrested those parents. We represented that whole family. We filed a motion to stay the deportation. We prevailed with the daughter who had DACA, but the parents were gone. The lack of humanity. They've lived here for 15 years. They owned a home, his tools. They were never able to say goodbye. Rational. We need a system that's rational, as Father Hesburgh said. It's so complicated and so amended that it's almost irrational. And through our work, we try to bring some sense of rationality into the system through legislation, litigation, and public education. We don't need to be detaining people. There's a better way. There are community-based programs that would provide care for these families. I witnessed these 3 principles coming together on a cold winter night in Chicago. The phones were ringing, the text messages were flying, and 1,000 people showed up spontaneously at O'Hare Airport, drawn by the plight and the need of refugees who, because of the executive order travel ban against Muslims, were denied entry into the United States. Some of these people had lawful residency And suddenly, we saw as a nation the love and respect of individuals who came out and said, and offered their care and demanded what is right. I can imagine Father Hesburgh being outside on that cold winter night in a black coat with Father Ned on his side, welcoming those individuals and providing protection for those in need. The lesson I've learned from Father Hesburgh is that we can't stand on the sidelines when we see injustice. We have to act. We have to make things different. We can make change. Volunteer. Reach out to an immigrant refugee family. If you're a lawyer, volunteer to be a pro bono lawyer. Draft letters to the editors, op-eds, accompany an immigrant to court, to their lawyer's office. We can make a difference. Draft letters to the editor or op-eds. We can make the system generous, humane, and rational. And if we don't, who will? Thank you.